Hi, everybody. My name is Jessica Davis, and I'm the Marketing and Communications Manager for Fear Free. Thank you for joining us for Cultivating Healthy Resilience. Presenting today is Dr. Laurie Fonken, Director of DVM Counseling and Wellness Programs at Colorado State University, and she will be discussing the impact of compassion fatigue and moral distress and how to develop a healthy level of resilience, self-compassion, and self-care. If you have any questions during this webinar, please be sure to enter them in the Q&A box. We will have a brief Q&A session at the end of the presentation. We're so excited to have Dr. Fonken here with us today. So on that note, Dr. Fonken, take it away.
Thank you, Jessica. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening for this session on cultivating healthy resilience. I've been doing presentations on mental health and wellness in the veterinary profession over the last probably 7 years. I've learned so much from the folks that I've worked with and presented to about cultivating healthy resilience and some of the challenges to well-being. So we'll be going over those tonight, and please feel free to send any questions Jessica's way, and we'll get to those at the end. So one thing that I have learned from working with veterinary professionals and speaking with veterinary professionals and students is that you all are highly resilient folks. We give all of our students the Strength Finders assessment at the beginning of their first year, and the two top strengths that the students come up with are achievers and learners. So these are folks that are high achievers, have strived to get what they want, and are very curious learners. And so I would imagine that if we polled practicing veterinarians, that many of you would also be high in achievement and learning. Veterinary professionals are dedicated caregivers and healers. You practice by offering care to your clients and patients, and your impact is in the healing that you provide to them. Many of you have been called to serve as veterinarians or in the veterinary profession. And I know we have students that are part of Fear Free as well. CSU actually just became certified. Our students are now joining Fear Free. So many of you have been called to serve in this profession, and some from a very young age. When we asked our students, oftentimes they've been called or known they wanted to be a veterinarian since before the age of 10. They can either share a story of their own calling, or their family has told them a story about how they cared for things at a very young age. So you have a calling that brings you here, and many times it's the calling that also keeps you here. I did a town hall meeting last week with Dr. Becker and a few veterinarians and a veterinary behaviorist. And I was super impressed by the commitment of those of you that have gone through the Fear Free process and have made that a part of your practice. You know how to provide a setting that is safe for your patients and for your clients. Their needs are in the forefront of much of what you do, if not all of what you do. And so that commitment to the service that you have is something that will serve you as well. If you take the time to turn some of that energy, effort, and compassion back on yourselves that you give freely to so many others, it's something that you already have within you. And one of my colleagues, who is a veterinarian and a psychotherapist, talks about how many veterinarians are highly sensitive people, compassionate, caring, kind, giving, altruistic people, sensitive to the needs of others, and working in a very provocative environment. And you may be able to relate to that. Ever-changing environment, a lot of differences in the cases that you see, some of the crisis situations that come up. You might go in one day from all different sorts of appointments, a well puppy visit, a new puppy visit, and then a euthanasia or a hit by car. So the environment is constantly changing. And you bring to it so much that it can sometimes be wearing on you, just given the provocativeness of the environment. So I want to first define compassion. There are 4 different elements of compassion. The first one is that we recognize that there is suffering. So when compassion gets, when we're motivated to be compassionate, it's because we recognize there's some suffering. We have empathy for that suffering. And then with that empathy, it creates this motivation for us to relieve the suffering of the other. And then we take action to relieve the suffering. So there are 4 components of compassion. Compassion is not the same thing as empathy. So compassion is recognizing there is suffering. Then we have empathy or care for that other that is suffering. We have the motivation to relieve the suffering, and then that moves us to action. We take action in a way that will relieve the suffering. And so most of the folks that I work with and know have a high level of compassion, especially for their patients. They recognize the suffering, they have empathy for it, they care, they want to relieve it, and then you all take action to do so. So some of the fine art of suffering. This is a slide that I put in here because this is something that one of my colleagues shared at a conference one time and that I have noticed as well. So a lot of what we see, what I've observed is that there's a fine art of suffering that happens sometimes in clinics or hospitals. And this may sound familiar to you. I've been so busy, I have not had time for lunch today. Well, you think that's bad. I've only eaten a protein bar in the last 24 hours. I was here until 8 o'clock last night. Well, you think that's bad. I left at 11 and was up all night doing paperwork. I've not had a chance to take a bathroom break for 6 hours. Well, I found a solution to that. I'm wearing a diaper, so I don't need to take one at all. And I know this is kind of light and humorous, and it's also something that I observe on a pretty regular basis at our hospital and at other clinics. And a lot of times when I present this slide, when I'm at different clinics or in different places, people will say, yep, that's us, right? He or she who suffers the most wins something. I'm not sure what it is. But it even happens in vet school. The students that study the most or sacrifice the most are the ones that feel that there's some prize to that suffering, and yet I have yet to identify what that is. So think about the fine art of suffering, and if that's something that you all have at your place of work. Some of the challenges, and these are not all the challenges. I have a much longer presentation that I give that really goes in depth into some of these challenges, but we're talking today about compassion fatigue. And so the term secondary trauma is the term that's used to kind of define or to encapsulate what compassion fatigue and empathic distress. And secondary trauma is a term that came out of trauma work, and we had a lot of post-traumatic stress disorder work done in the past, maybe in the 70s, when they started to see veterans coming back from war and having some post-traumatic stress disorder and trauma as a result of their experience. And what they found was that some of the people that were living with these folks that had the post-traumatic stress disorder were having secondary trauma, because they were also feeling the experience of the trauma, and sometimes as though it had happened to them. And so they call that secondary trauma. You didn't actually go through the trauma, but your loved one did, or you observed a trauma and you take on the feelings as though that trauma happened to you. And so underneath secondary trauma is compassion fatigue. And compassion fatigue is really defined as the feelings for another when you observe their suffering. It's the compassionate feelings that you feel for another when you see them in suffering. And there's a difference between compassion fatigue and empathic distress. One of my teachers, Roshi Joan Halifax, talks about empathic distress. And empathic distress is when you actually start to feel the feelings with the other. So with compassion, again, you can see the suffering, you have the empathy, the feeling with that person, you're able to get motivated to act. So compassion is something that drives you to act. Compassion fatigue happens with a prolonged exposure to a lot of suffering. And yet you can meet that suffering with compassion. Empathic distress is really where you get down in the suffering with the other person, and it starts to feel like you're suffering, and you start to experience the emotions of the suffering as if it were happening to you. And when you get into a place of empathic distress, your emotions kind of take over. And sometimes when I've seen practitioners or even myself get into this empathic distress place, the client can start to try and take care of you because they see that you're also suffering. And so when we get into empathic distress, we're dysregulated, and we need to step out of that so that we can be there to serve the client and patient in the moment with what they're experiencing, and it's not about our experience. So there are two different things, and I have a lot more information on that. It's a little bit confusing, but I think one thing that helps us practice is our ability to be compassionate. So if I tell you you have compassion fatigue, sometimes people think that means they have to stop being compassionate. Well, if we stop being compassionate, we shut off from our clients and patients. We kind of start to do robotic medicine where we're just going through the motions but not really connecting. And so it's important to recognize if you're getting fatigued, how to take care of yourself in that, or if you're having empathic distress where your feelings are really overcoming you and it's becoming about your unresolved grief around something that happened in your life and not the client, you need, and the patient, you need to step back and say, I need to take a pause here and figure out what's going on with me if I'm experiencing this trauma. Now I know that there's a high level, we use these terms, compassion fatigue and empathic distress. And I think one thing I know for sure is that your compassion and your ability to be compassionate. Roshi Joan Halifax also talks about having a soft front and a strong back. So your soft front is your ability to be compassionate with others, and you have a strong back that keeps you from going into empathic distress or compassion fatigue. And then the other thing I commonly see in practices is moral distress, or some people are now calling it moral trauma. And this is where you all make decisions, or not make decisions, but you may have something that will help with one of your patients, and you express that to the client, and they make a decision that's different than what you would hope. And so sometimes you are put into positions where you know you have something that you could do to help the patient, and you're not being allowed to do that for some reason. It could be because the client is saying no. It could be because your workplace is saying, no, we can't do that. Moral distress comes in when there's an ask for euthanasia that may not quite be necessary. And so moral distress is also something that you all face on a regular basis. And it can become pretty debilitating at times to think about working in a situation where doing your best medicine or doing what you think is best is sometimes not the thing that's allowed. You can also have moral distress when you're in a situation where you're observing someone else do something that does not meet with your moral values or your standards of practice, but you're in this situation and you need your job, and sometimes you're asked to do things. And so that also can cause some moral distress. And then we look at burnout, which there's 6 elements to burnout. One is workload, excessive workload. One is how much control you have in a situation, in a practice, in your work environment. One is about fairness and how policies or people are treated in your practice. Are things done fairly? How are you rewarded and recognized for the work that you do? And then finally, does your workplace meet the values and ethics that you hold as a practitioner? So compassion fatigue can sometimes fall under burnout. But I'm not going to go into that anymore. I just want to let you know that these are some of the main challenges that I've seen in the work that I've done. And burnout is mostly around the workplace. The World Health Organization recently put burnout in their diagnostic manual because it is a workplace issue that they're seeing a good deal of. So let's see if I can get to the next slide. So this is a quote from one of a veterinarian. We had a big conference here a few years ago, and we talk about resilience a lot. And what she said was that some who are highly resilient mask their suffering, depression, and substance use with performance. What I've learned in working with veterinary students and veterinarians over the last 12 years is that you all are highly resilient. You know how to get through things. We don't need to do resiliency training with you all. You already have that. You know how to address a challenge, how to get through a challenge, and what to do. And you're able to do it. And I tell my students that because if they weren't resilient, they wouldn't still be in vet school. They would have not made it. They would have dropped out. They would have never gotten to vet school. And you all are either in school or have made it out of school. So there's no question as to your ability to be resilient. But there's a level of unhealthy resilience. And that's when we use our performance and we keep performing and we mask our suffering. We don't do any healing. We don't deal with the transition from maybe a crisis situation where we had to call on our resilience. We don't stop and say, wow, what happened? I need to process that. I may need to do some healing. So there's a healthy level of resilience and an unhealthy level of resilience. And I say the healthy resilience is the ability to get through the situation and then take time to process the situation and do some healing. So just getting through is not enough. And I think what we're going to see after what we're dealing with now, the corona, is that people are going to be resilient and get through it. But it's going to take a long time for people to heal and come back together. And if we just jump right back into work or life as it was before or normal whatever, we're going to miss that opportunity for the healing. So it's going to be super important to do that healing. And that takes thoughtful reflection, processing, and self-care. There's a process called kintsugi, and it's a Japanese art where they take pottery that's been broken and they put it back together with gold in the cracks. And I love that because sometimes we might feel broken and cracked, and sometimes that's how the light gets in through the cracks. And the healing process is part of putting that all back together in whatever way and becoming whole again. And that's what we're all going to have to do after this. And it's a good practice for us in our lives. So I want you to think about this care equation. And this is something that I came up with because it's difficult to watch the challenges to veterinary professionals, and I am so passionate about the people that I work with and I care about. And so I came up with this equation, and I call it the care equation. And it's X is equal to or greater than Y. Simple. X is equal to or greater than Y. X is you and your well-being and your health. So X is you and Y is everyone and everything else. And I know this is hard. I've talked to other colleagues. They say they'll never buy it. I understand that because you all are used to putting everyone else ahead of you. And so all I'm asking is consider X is equal to Y, that your health and wellness is equal to, if not more important than those you serve. And it's like the airplane when they talk about the oxygen mask coming down. And many of you have heard this. You know, they say when the oxygen mask, if it should come down, please secure your mask first before helping another. Well, why is that? Because if you don't have oxygen, you're going to pass out, and then you're going to require extra resources to help you, when actually if you put your mask on first, you'll be able to help others. And so please just consider the possibility that X is equal to Y. I say that X is equal to or greater than because at times you need to put yourself first in order to be able to serve. And I know you all are servers. I know that. And it's very hard for you to say no and put yourself first because there's always someone else that needs something. But if you're not well, you cannot serve. And I know that sometimes your animals can even tell when you're not well and when you're off. And so those you serve deserve to have the best you possible. And so that means at times you're going to have to put yourself equal to or greater than everything and everyone else. Now here we come to the fine art of self-care. So there's the fine art of suffering. If that's your clinic, consider making self-care a competition. I made sure to drink 8 ounces of water every hour and made regular pit stops between appointments. I took 20 minutes to eat my lunch and walk around the building. I asked my colleague to switch cases with me so I could leave at 5, and I'll do the same for them in the future. What would happen if we made self-care the competition? Not he or she who suffers the most, puts in the most hours, sacrifices the most, but he or she who, and some of you may be doing this, he or she who stops and says, you know what, I need to take 20 minutes to eat and walk outside because I need to bring my best self back into this clinic for the afternoon appointments. So just something to consider, making self-care a competition. Feel free to share these slides if you have them with your staff and clinic and say, you know, we put everyone else first, so we need to put ourselves first, and how about we start this competition? Boundaries are important in self-care and dealing with compassion fatigue. A boundary is a line marking a border. It keeps in what you want and keeps out what you don't want. And healthy personal boundaries are the physical, emotional, and mental limits we establish to protect ourselves from being manipulated, used, or violated by others. They allow us to separate who we are and what we think and feel from the thoughts and feelings of others. And it's really important to have professional boundaries because they define the limits and responsibility of the people with whom you interact in the workplace. Maybe I'll do a webinar on boundaries because I have a lot more to say about this, but I think it's super important because we teach people how to treat us by the way we treat ourselves. So your boundaries are going to be really important if you're looking at dealing with your own compassion fatigue and burnout and building your healthy resilience. So I want to finish with this slide on compassion satisfaction. We hear a lot of compassion satisfaction in those who work in this profession. It's the positive aspects of working to care for others. It's the thing that makes you smile at the end of the day. It's all those pictures that I've seen on your bulletin boards of happy clients and thank you notes, right? Compassion makes us feel good. Compassionate action activates pleasure circuits in the brain, and compassion training programs, even very brief ones, strengthen brain circuits for pleasure and reward and lead to lasting increases in self-reported happiness. So the goal is self-care, compassion satisfaction, healthy resilience. So I think I'll open it up now to questions.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Fonken. So our first question is, please give an example of a self-care competition.
Okay, one thing that I've heard some clinics doing is just a competition around drinking enough water every day. I can't remember what they recommend, 8 ounces of water every hour or something, I'm not sure, but doing a competition around how much water you're drinking. Maybe one around sleep, keeping track of how much sleep you're getting, looking at that. It could be movement, taking time to get out and walk around during the day as you're working. I think a self-care competition could maybe even be like asking for something you need from someone else. I know that's hard for us to do, but can you actually ask for what you need? So those are a few ideas. If you think about healthy habits, just to see if you can pick one: drinking water, sleeping, movement, exercise, asking for help, figuring out a way to do a kindness to another person, something like that.
Great, thank you. The next question is, do you have any games or suggestions on how to start the conversation on self-care?
You know, I think I like the fine art of suffering and the fine art of self-care slides, because we can all laugh at ourselves and go, yeah, that's us. Starting the conversation on self-care, I think the other thing is to use the oxygen mask and just say, you know, you all do such a good job of working hard to provide a fear-free clinic for the people that walk through your front door, but all of you are in there as well. So how can you maybe take some of those principles that you're already doing and come and just start the conversation on, we do this so well for everyone else, how can we do it better for ourselves and each other? And just start a conversation around that. Maybe a survey in your practice with a few questions on it. You know, what are our strengths? What do we maybe need to work on as around self-care? And what are some ideas? And come up with some creative things.
Great, thank you. The next question is, how do you feel compassion fatigue and empathic distress factors in when caring for your own animals in their times of illness and or death?
For your own animals, I would say that is your own compassion and empathy and grief and your own relationship with your animal. So I would not say that is empathic distress. I would say that's actually your own emotional experience with your animal, and you have that, and that's going to be part of your process with your animal, and that is part of the experience as an animal owner, I think, and the compassion you have and the empathy that you have and the relationship that you have, and the, if it's a grief and loss situation, those are all of your experiences, and being able to have those, experience those, process those, and it takes time. That is really important, and you deserve to be able to do that. Sometimes when we take our own losses into our appointments with us, that's not where it belongs. So being able to have a safe place to process through that with people that you love, and a support system, and allowing yourself that space for the grief is really important.
All right, thank you. The next question is, what if the workplace is already full of negative competition? How would you break that to change?
I think just naming it. I mean, if you can put up a fine art of suffering for your own clinic and just point it out, because when you look at it, I mean, it's hard to break, and I know some people just have to do it by starting to be a role model on it and calling it out. And I know that's scary. It's not easy to do. And yet when I showed that slide at our own teaching hospital, everyone was laughing a little bit, because yeah, they see that every day. So just naming it and saying, okay, is this what we really want to do? And who wins here? He or she who suffers the most wins what? I mean, maybe that's the hierarchy, or the gold standard of the clinic is to be that person, the king or queen of suffering. So maybe just naming it, talking about it, and if you get one or two people that are willing to do the fine art of self-care, and we've got a couple in our hospital that actually do this stuff. They take lunch, they give the students lunch, they, you know, people see that. So maybe just a couple of you that start the self-care competition.
All right, thank you. The next question is, so if I understand correctly, compassion fatigue is inevitable, but we need to set boundaries so that it doesn't affect us too much?
You know, I don't know if it's inevitable. I do, well, it is a part of the practice because you are compassionate people. And there are times when you will feel fatigued by it. And I think recognizing that is going to be really important. And yes, not shutting yourself off from feeling compassion, but recognizing that you are compassionate, that you've seen a lot of difficult things, that it is, you're starting to get exhausted from it. I had a veterinarian tell me that he stopped doing, I mean, he was just doing routine checkups. And I think he said 1 week he found tumors in, I don't know, 60% of the pets. And he had to talk to owners and give bad news to all these owners in 1 week. And he said he had to take a break. And you know, have other people do some of these appointments. So it's figuring out when you're starting to feel that fatigue, knowing it's not that you have to shut off your compassion, but yes, maybe you have to take a step back and take care of yourself a little bit in a way. And it's not easy, I know, when you guys are so busy and you have full caseloads and things like that. But doing some self-compassion practices, and there's all kinds of things online about that. Kristen Neff is a person that works with self-compassion. The other thing that I know, because I'm a super compassionate person as well, and I do counseling all the time, is that each and every person that I work with has their own level of resilience and ability to get through things. And so if I can offer a safe space for them and my compassion and my listening and my care, they will get through things. And so that's helped me as well when I start to get fatigued.
Great, thank you. The next question is, I recently recognized I had compassion fatigue after spending a year with my son recovering from a surgery and then dealing with work. I took 6 weeks off and changed many aspects of my life. One thing I find, though, is my work environment still pushes us into unhealthy habits like skipping lunch and staying late regularly. How do you recommend we deal with this as associate vets?
Yeah, that is one of the number one questions that I get when I'm out speaking to people. It's extremely difficult it's the culture of the practice that you're coming up against. And, you know, it'd be easy to say, well, find another practice. And I know, I'm not saying that. I know that's not the right answer. And so it's about finding those little ways to take care of yourself and to try not to buy into the culture of that as much as you can. I don't know what would happen if you would ask for a little bit more time or ask for lunch or ask for a bathroom break. It's a tough situation. And that's why when I put together the CARE equation, that you are equal to or greater than, your health and wellness is equal to or greater than those you serve. And I know that's a hard one, especially for associate veterinarians. So, and it sounds like you've had a lot going on, and were able to take some time for yourself and do some healing. And yeah, I wish I had a really good answer for that, because I'd give it to every associate veterinarian that I've talked to about this. I think part of it is just trying to put yourself first and ask for some of those things. And then if you can't do it in your practice, to try and especially do it when you're not there. I don't know if other people have any suggestions for that one as well, but that is the one thing that I seem to come up against most often, is the culture is not going to support this. And I could say, well, move to a different culture, but it may be the same or worse. So figuring out what will serve you and what you need, and trying to implement some practices for yourself in the midst of all of that.
Awesome, thank you. The next question is, with situations of moral distress and trauma and burnout, is leaving the workplace and or the profession an act of self-care?
For some people it is. And I've seen a number of people leave the profession. Maybe not forever, but for a while. And it can be. I've also found people that have left practices and found other practices that are more fitting for them or more healthy. So I think if you have the ability to consider that, and it's something that you can do. One thing that I'm finding is that there are a lot of possibilities for veterinarians. It's pretty scary to say, I'm going to step out of this. What if I never get a good job or don't find anything, or, I can't imagine that. And yet a lot of folks are going on to relief status for a while, just being relief veterinarians. Some are finding other positions or part-time. So I don't think that, I think that the job prospects seem better than they have been in the past, and yet it's still pretty frightening. And the answer I would say is yes, sometimes it's a self-care thing to step out and say, I'm going to take a break. I need to. Because if I am, boy, got me on my soapbox. It's hard for me to watch us lose veterinarians through suicide, through depression, anxiety, substance use, numbing out just to get through the day. So I'd rather have you step away from a clinic than and take care of yourself than end up not being here in one way or the other.
Thank you. Our next question is, how would you recommend responding to a coworker or group of coworkers engaging in suffering one-uppers?
Oh, wear a diaper to work. I don't know. I don't know. It's just so curious to me, and I see it too at the office. So I think I don't know if you can bring it out in some way that's kind of humorous. They may not like it though, and part of it is saying, that's what they're choosing to do, but I don't need to be a part of that. I may just look at them and say, wow, isn't that curious? Or help me understand why y'all think this is a good way to be practicing. But I know if you can't use humor, and if they're really just in it to compete about who can suffer the most, it's kind of fascinating to watch that. It's hard to watch it too, and I watch it at our hospital because our residents and our interns tend to get the brunt of some of it. Working with highly, people that do work excessively, so it's hard to know where to set those boundaries. But it'll be curious and interesting for all of you now to look at your practices and see how the fine art of suffering plays out in each of the places that you are. And if they want to change that, it's something you can bring up. Can we switch this paradigm? But they may not. And for different reasons. It could be imposter syndrome. It could be fear of losing their job. Who knows what the reason is that people do this.
Great, thank you. Our next question is, can we relate our fear-free practice from how we treat our patients with fear-free to how we take care of our team? This time I feel that our teams are so fearful. How do we work through this?
Yes, and that's one thing that I was so impressed by the town hall was this commitment to fear-free. And I think, I haven't thought a lot about this, so I'm happy to speak with anyone more about it. I'd like to learn more about the fear-free practices, and yes, it would be something that you could transfer to your teams. Fear is a huge thing, and when we're in fear, we're reacting. Fear is a reactive emotion. It causes reaction. When we're acting out of care or kindness or compassion, it's an action. It's an action. It's an active process. But fear is most times reactive. A fear-free practice is an active practice. So if there's a way to transfer that or transition that to your team and say, we want a fear-free practice, we want a caring, compassionate, kind practice, we act in that way towards one another. And it has to be set up as the culture for the team as well as for the clients and patients. And I'm new to this whole fear-free and I need to learn more about it, but I do think that there's an opportunity here. And I'd even be happy to look at the different elements of the fear-free practice, and how could you then transfer that to the people, the team that's taking care of these patients and clients in this way.
Great, thank you. Our next question is, how do supervisors recognize empathic distress in staff, and what should we be seeing or asking about?
Okay. And I think this is for empathic distress or any kind of distress. I would say looking at people's behaviors. If you see people starting to shut down or withdraw, that's a sign. People that are maybe more irritable, reactive. I have a whole presentation on how to talk to a distressed colleague. Any changes in behavior as far as being late to work, missing work more, a negative attitude, the things that they're saying, has the way they're communicating changed at all? If they just feel fatigued, if they aren't keeping care of themselves. So anything that you notice that's different about them in that way. And one thing that can be important is to debrief with your team if you have a chance to do that on a regular basis, where you can check in with folks and say, I know we had a really hard day today, or I know we had a really hard week. Your practice has to be safe, a safe place to talk about those things. But even one-on-one as a supervisor, you can check in with someone and say, hey, I've noticed that you feel a little distant, or I've noticed that you've been late a few times, or I've noticed that you're easily getting frustrated, or you seem tired, or whatever it is you're noticing, and say, is there something going on that I can help you with? And if you're going to approach a colleague or someone you supervise, make sure that you do it in a place away from other people. Find a space to do it, and make sure that you have the time to really listen to what's going on with that person. So not in between appointments or something like that, but when you at least have 15-20 minutes to say, hey, here's the things that I've noticed and I'm concerned, and I just want to check in and see if there's anything going on that I can help with. And if you're concerned about a specific thing, maybe you have some resources you can offer, or you can tell them, I'm happy to work with you on finding some resources or finding a solution to this. You have to make sure that you're willing to go through all of it. But I think sometimes just taking the time to ask and then really listen, and don't try and fix it. Just listen to what's going on. How can I help? And then work together with them on a way forward.
Great, thank you. Our next question is, are there any tools for helping ourselves and others to start the healing process?
One is just naming it. So I think that's great. I mean, we need to take some time to heal here. So it's gonna be naming it. We've just gotten through all of this, whatever it is. We need to take some time to come together, to listen to one another, to share our experience, and talk about how to move forward. And so I think a couple of things for the healing is just the time and the space and the safety and the community support of coming together. And there's a term called generous listening that one of my teachers shares with us. We do a healer's art course, and I'm happy to share any of these resources. But she talks about generous listening as you just listen to hear the other person's story. That's it. You're not going to fix, you're not going to give advice, you're not going to one-up them with your story. You're just going to listen to their story and hold it in a safe container for them so that they can share it and you receive it. And sometimes there's so much power in that, and just hearing the other person's story, and then you share your story, and that's it. No fixing, no advice giving, no expert, just sharing. So the healing process takes time and space, and it may take, I don't know what this process is going to look like when we get out of this, but it could be something that happens right after an event, and then a week later, and then a month after that, that you get together and check in. So but it's an important part of healthy resilience. Thank you for the question.
Thank you. And our last question is, when setting boundaries about time, which usually means not squeezing in another appointment, staff and clients feel we are not caring for our clients. How do you talk to staff about this and find the fine line between client and patient care and self-care?
Right. Right. And I think that's really difficult for all of us, to have people thinking that we don't care if we don't take that late appointment or whatever. But I think that part of it is just starting to say, you know, I care enough about you and enough about your pet that I'm going to say that I'm not going to be able to do this appointment now because I want to bring my best self and I need to be able to be fully present with you in this appointment. And right now I don't have the time to do that. And I'm not really sure how these are coming, if they're coming in late or whatever. But so I would just say that, okay, squeezing in another appointment, I know would maybe be helpful for the client today. And yet I want to bring my best self to this appointment and I need to leave at this time. And so it's better for me to have that appointment at a different time because I need to do this now. And, I need to take care of myself in order to be able to bring my full self to taking care of this. So that's part of it. I mean, we teach people how to treat us by the way we treat ourselves. So if you think about that, if you can set that boundary and say, we're not going to have any more squeeze in late appointments, and here's why. Because we need to take care of ourselves equally as well as we take care of our patients and clients. And so that means setting this as our boundary and adhering to it. And if the client feels like we're not caring about their patient or them, they have the choice to go somewhere else. I mean, that's not ideal, it's difficult, and yet in our practice, we're teaching people that it's just as important that we take care of ourselves so that we can bring our best selves to take care of others. And you may lose a few clients, but you may not. They may say, wow, that really makes sense. I respect that you want to bring your best self to this appointment and I can wait till tomorrow.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Fonken, and thank you everyone for joining the webinar tonight. You'll be able to find the recording of this webinar on fearfreepets.com within the next week. Thanks again and have a great night.